I'm sure you've heard the term dominant used to describe a chord. Maybe you've heard the term tonic or subdominant as well. Unlike the tags that chords get to describe what they are, like major or minor, these terms describe how chords function, and there's a big difference. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Chris. Today we will discover the difference between tonic, subdominant, and dominant functions. Now, as I said at the top, these terms describe functionality, how chords actually work together. And it turns out that each chord in a key either generates or resolves musical tension. That's how music gets its sense of motion. You're either generating or resolving this tension. The three major chords in any key, the 1, the 4, and the 5 chords, are our easiest way to sort of watch and catalog how these functions actually work. But it turns out that every chord in the key can also be assigned to one of these functions. I'm going to explain what these terms actually mean. Then we're going to zoom in and I'm going to show you which chords get which functions in a key by using chords that we already know. This video, as always, is brought to you by the folks who support me on my Patreon page. If you enjoy the style and the content that I produce and you'd like to get a little bit deeper, get access to more content, some live events, consider supporting the channel through my Patreon page. And if you do decide to support the channel, I thank you in advance. So these terms, tonic, subdominant, and dominant, describe functionality more than anything else, how chords function, and they do that through levels of tension. And moving between these chords, these chord types, these function types, either very, very tense or very, very stable chords, music gets its sense of motion. It feels like we're moving somewhere. We're moving from chord to chord. Different emotions are being generated by the use of this tension and release. Tonic chords are up first. These are the most stable chords in the key, and they're the best place to dump out any tension. In other words, if you want a song or a chord progression to feel resolved, you use the tonic function chords. Subdominant chords introduce some instability. They're slightly more tense. They have a desire to move somewhere, either to more tension or to dump back down into something that's more stable. And finally, dominant chords introduce the most instability in the key, and I'll show you how this works. They typically want to resolve back down to tonic function chords. Okay, let's zoom in and look at this stuff directly on the fretboard where it belongs. Okay, we're going to explore tonic, subdominant, and dominant functions. We're going to use the key of A to sort of map all this stuff out. The key of A comes from, is generated by the A major scale, these 7 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's the A major scale, generates the A major key by generating chords off of each one of these notes. And here they are, the 1 chord, the 2 chord, the 3 chord, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we're back to 1. These are all the chords in the key of A, right? Now what we're going to do is find out which of these chords functions in which way, tonic, subdominant, or dominant. We're going to do it in a couple of different ways. Before we do, I just want to show something to you, and that is I want to put something in your ear and sort of leave it percolating there for this lesson, and that is that the 7th note of a major scale is called the leading tone, and this is why, because it leads us, it's very, very unstable, it leads us back to it, it generates a desire for stability. That's the leading tone. Any chord in this key that contains this note is going to naturally want to pull us back to the 1, right? It's going to want to pull us back to that tonic chord. Now, as I said at the top, the 1, 4, and 5 chords are sort of our best example of these 3 functions, tonic, subdominant, and dominant. The 1 chord is tonic, the 4 chord is subdominant, and the 5 chord is dominant, and I want to show you why. We're going to do this in a couple of different ways. First thing I'm going to do is reduce these 3 chords, the A, D, and E chords, down to triads, so they're just a little bit easier to see, and I'm going to put them on the D, G, and B string set. So here's my A triad, here's my D triad, and here's my E triad. Tonic, subdominant, dominant. And I want to show you how these things work. We're going to start with this subdominant chord, this D chord. And listen to how in the key of A, when you play this D chord, it feels like there's a lift, right? And what we sort of naturally want to hear now is that A chord. And we're just going to explore how that works. We're going to take each one of these notes and we're going to watch it move from the D to the A chord. Here's the note on the D string. Stays the same. The note on the G string goes down a half step. And this note on the B string goes down a whole step. Right? So what we're hearing is sort of a drop down into the tonic, right? A lift and a drop. This subdominant function just generates a little instability that we want to hear fall back down. And we're going to do the same thing now with the dominant chord, which is this E chord. And you can automatically hear in the key of A, listen to this E. Let's explore how this resolves back into the tonic. And right off the bat, you can see it's got that leading tone, right? That goes up a half step. That note goes up a whole step. And the note on top stays the same. So what I want to do now is listen to the subdominant to tonic resolution. Feels like it falls down, like the cadence sort of falls down to the one. Subdominant to tonic. Whereas the dominant chord pulls back into the tonic much stronger. Right? This falling sounds very gentle, whereas the pull has more tension, right? Tonic, subdominant, dominant. Now, as you can see, there are other chords in this key that don't have a function yet. We're going to assign these other chords into one of these functions, and here's how we're going to do it. Any two of these chords that share two common tones can be grouped into the same function, okay? Let me just show you how that works. We're going to do the tonic chord first. This A chord, A, C sharp, and E, shares two notes with the sixth chord, that F sharp minor. A, C sharp, and E, the F sharp minor chord is F sharp, A, C sharp. So it shares these two notes. Right? You've heard this kind of thing before. These two chords, the 1 and the 6, are tonic functions. They represent the most stability in the key. Okay? Let's go to our subdominant chord, this 4 chord. This D chord is D, F sharp, A. It happens to share two notes with the 2 chord, or B minor, which is B, D, F sharp. So when we hear this subdominant function, 4-1, we can also replicate that same amount of tension and release with our 2 chord. Because they share two common tones. So our subdominant chords are 4 and 2. Now let's get to our dominant chord, our 5 chord, which is an E chord. E, G sharp, and B happens to share two of the same tones, two of the same notes with our 7 chord, which is G sharp, B, and D. And as you can see, that 7 chord contains the leading tone. So we can generate about the same amount of tension with that 7 chord as we can with our 5 chord. Right? So that 7 chord is a dominant chord. It has a dominant function. Now as you can see, there's one chord left out. That's the 3 chord. The 3 chord, C sharp minor, shares two notes with the tonic. Our A chord is A, C sharp, and E, and our 3 chord is C sharp, E, and G sharp. But you can see that the 3 chord has that leading tone. So it really can't function as a tonic chord because because it has that certain level of tension, right? It's not as stable as the 1 or the 6. So the 3 chord is sort of our odd man out. It doesn't really function as a tonic, subdominant, or dominant chord. It really is sort of like out in the middle of nowhere by itself. It shares those common tones with the tonic, but it has the leading tone. Classically, that 3 chord is used to bridge tonic and subdominant functions. Let me show you how that works. Puff the Magic Dragon is a great opportunity to show you that. Right? Tonic, 3 chord, subdominant 4. Right? So the 3 chord is usually used to bridge some tension, a certain amount of tension between tonic and subdominant. So I want to show you one more thing. I'm going to go back to these triads, and I'm just going to use the subdominant, dominant, tonic functions, and I'm just going to play with them. I'm going to say to myself, I want to generate a chord progression that goes from the most tension, dominant, passes through the subdominant, right, a little bit more of a relief, and then dumps out to the tonic. So I can do that in a couple different ways. I can play E, D, and then A, right? There's my tension going most tension, a little more stability, and then finally all the stability of the tonic. I could do that same thing by playing the 7 chord, the 2 chord, and the 6. Right? Same amount of tension. And resolve. Because I'm just using the functions. What if I wanted a chord progression that went from the least amount of tension to the most amount of tension? That would be the tonic, subdominant, dominant chord. Right? Stability, instability, tension, resolve. So you can see that you can use these functions to plot out and manage tension in a chord progression. So in other words, if you're writing something, maybe you're trying to find the next chord that works in a chord progression, instead of just stabbing around hoping to find a solution, ask yourself the question, this next chord in the chord progression I'm writing, I want it to be more or less stable than the last one. You can then apply this idea of tonic, subdominant, and dominant to find the chord that fits in your chord progression. Okay, there it is, tonic, subdominant, and dominant. These functions give music its sense of motion by either introducing or resolving musical tension, right? Stability and instability. Moving between those gives us our sense of motion and movement through music. That tonic provides the most stability, that subdominant generates some tension, right? We can either move to more tension or move back to the tonic chord, and that dominant chord really, really wants to pull back to the tonic. Tabs for this lesson, just like every lesson on this channel, are available through my Patreon page. Again, if you'd like to support the channel, I thank you very much in advance. I hope you found this lesson interesting. I hope you found it helpful. Stay curious, and I'll see you next time.